This is TWiT.
All right, Richard. You have 22 minutes and 15 seconds to sell us some brown liquor. We've got Stephen Wolfram's going to be on the horn in a minute.
I'm in a panic. Absolutely.
Don't panic.
Yeah,
but the smartest man in the world is about to join us.
Yeah, no kidding.
Don't panic, but I mean, maybe panic. I don't know.
I'm going back to my stomping grounds. So as you've heard me tell stories before, when I go to Scotland, I like to go stay at the Hotel Craigielachi, the Craigielachi Hotel on the Spey River. And Rothes is a town in Moray, which is just north of the Craigielachi, which is also on the Spey River. That town is old. It's been around since there's records going back to 600 AD for that town. And it's not huge, but it is whiskey central, right? This is the Spey side. So literally within the limits of the town are the distilleries Speyburn, Glenturret, Glenspey, and Glenrothes. The Rothes Castle, which is a ruin now, built back in 1200, is right beside the Glenspey distillery on the southern side of town. So now on the way from the Craigielachi to Rothes, you're going to pass Aberlour, Macallan, and Dewar's. So, which is also, where other whiskeys are made too. And not surprisingly, because this is Scotland, they got the railway in 1858, which is sort of your catalyst for an awful lot of these things. So the original Glenrothes distillery, built in 1878, 20 years after the railway came through, from a converted sawmill, and started producing whiskey. And long before the Diageos and United Distillers of the world, there was a group formed around Glenrothes and an Islay whiskey called Bunnahabhain, called the Highland Distillers. And this is, we're talking the late 1800s. So this is when France has its crisis in wine production, when they get the blight that kills a bunch of the grapes and drives the price of brandy through the roof. So whiskey sales go crazy. And these guys were right there in that hot time, and they bought up a bunch of other distilleries, including Glenglassaugh and Tamdhu. And then even after the 1800s into the early 1900s, they bought Highland Park. They also own Glenturret, which is famous grouse. And in the 90s, they bought Macallan. But going back to the early times, they had all the usual problems for old-style distilleries, including an explosion in 1903 that leveled the distillery and big chunks of the town. This is because you were vaporizing alcohol with fire, and sometimes bad things happen.
Yeah, I'm surprised it doesn't happen more often, actually.
Well, it doesn't happen anymore because by the 1960s, they go to steam for heating a distillery. So the fire is outside the building and you're pumping hot water in, and everything is safer, right? It's the right way to go. 60s and 70s is when everybody converts to that, so fewer people die. But you'll also notice if you ever go into these still buildings, we do the tours, that they're open air, right? That they're basically environmental temperatures because they always need to be vented.
Right.
In the early 1920s, a group called the Barry Brothers starts using Glenrothes to make a blended whiskey called Cutty Sark, which is a fairly famous whiskey.
I've heard of that, yes.
It's also the early 1920s, which is when Prohibition is on, so they immediately try and start selling it to the Americans. Barry Brothers has been around a long time, formed in 1698 as wine merchants, and of course they got into liquor and so forth. And so they expanded into this market and bought into the space, and were right through the Prohibition making money smuggling Cutty Sark into that. So they actually had a really good brand reputation when Prohibition ended. Now you can fast forward to the 1990s with this group called the Edrington Group. So the Edrington Group comes from Glen Grant and a bunch of or from William Grant and a bunch of the others. These were the counterpoint folks that were sort of anti-Diageo, anti-Suntory, anti-big conglomerate. They were Scots buying Scottish stuff. And so they acquired Highland Distillers, which at that point was over 100 years old. They've been around a long time. And actually took the group private. So got out of the public markets to help protect it. It was very much their mindset that they wanted to keep all of these different products, including Macallan. It's not a huge group. It's not like Diageo with 30-something distilleries. It's half a dozen. But very nice whiskeys, and they kept it private. And in part of that process, they ended up buying up. They actually sold off the Glenrothes distilleries back to Barry Brothers, and then turned around in 2017 and bought it all back. So at this particular moment, Edrington Group owns the whole cluster, and Berry Brothers is out of that business. And they, including, Cutty Sark is now over there as well. The distillery itself is interesting in the way that it operates. They don't do separate maltings the way that a lot of other distilleries do, but they do it with one of their other distilleries, Tamdu, which is about 20 kilometers away. That's where the maltings happen. They actually do their own, and then bring it back up to Glenrothes to do their own mash and milling and all the distillations. They have single 5-ton mash tun with copper top, 20 washbacks, of which 12 are Oregon pine, 8 are stainless. That ratio of 2-to-1 wood to steel is very deliberate, part of their flavor profile. They use your favorite, the yeast cream, to do a 55-hour fermentation to 8%.
My favorite.
That's absolutely a thing, right? And then they now have over the literally century have added stills to the point where they have 5 washes and 5 spirits, all identical. The wash stills, slightly smaller spirit stills, which is weird. Normally wash stills are bigger. And these are very tall neck stills with bulbs for maximized reflex, because they keep their still running at a higher, putting out a higher level product than most. They put out about 68 to 72%, and they actually barrel at 68, which is unusual. Most most Scottish whiskeys are barreled at 63. Almost all of that's really because of bourbon casks, which they rarely use. They only do a little bit of bourbon. They mostly barrel in sherry. They also make their own barrels. They do not use any of the shared cooperages. Glenrothes has their own cooperage. Now, when it was run by Berry Brothers did not do an age statement whiskey. They did these things they called vintages. They had their own names for them. But since Edrington has taken it back again, as of 2017, they are doing vintages. And I picked the base vintage, which I've had, called the Glenrothes 15. This is almost entirely sherry cask. So it's very rich, dark, reddish whiskey. 43%. It is available in the US. If you can find it in specialty stores, usually running about $100. I consider it a super old school Scottish whiskey. In that,
is it worth it?
This is a first drink whiskey.
Is it really peaty?
No peat at all. It's a Speyside side.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So very sweet and light, dark colored. It's a nice drinking whiskey. But yeah, for $100 a bottle, have one, and then fix to the famous grouse, stuff. Which you'll be paying the same guys, but that's a $20 bottle of whiskey.
Or have a Cutty Sark,
or the Cutty Sark. Yeah. Cutty Sark will work too. They own both Cutty Sark and famous grouse, so you have your choice.
Richard Campbell at a very nice episode of what we now are going to start calling Richard's brown liquor segment. By the way, I like that Microsoft band jacket, I guess. Or maybe you're a Scottish. I don't know what this is.
That sure looks like an RCMP surge.
It does.
Jersey,
he's a Mountie. That's what he is.
It looks like a Mountie. Yeah.
He's a Mountie with somehow working for Microsoft. Thank you to Joe Esposito once again for his lovely Photoshop skills. Not made on an iPhone, I have no doubt.
Yeah.
And Ricardo Campbell, the brown liquor segment. I love it. I
always drink brown liquor, but when I do,
he does look like the most interesting brown liquor man in the world.
Yep,
that is something.